So Angela just has some questions for you, and it'll only take a couple minutes, okay?
Okay.
One of my questions is, do they have Social Security income like we do here in the United States?
No, not per se. There is a pension system, but it's not generous like our Social Security system. There's a subsidy for the retired people and elderly people, but it is not. They're not really comparable. The question is, do they have a Social Security system like we have here in the U.S.?
No, not that kind of safety net.
No.
No.
It's a poor country.
And what about the orphans? People who don't want their children and they just dump them in.
We've learned nothing about that. I'm sorry, we were probably a little short on that sort of social service. We only learned about the elderly. We learned about daycare centers because they're all free.
Yes.
Because most mothers work. Like the elderly daycare center or the retirement community we met, one of the things that we were told is that was a poor black area in Havana, and that they would be sitting in their apartment all day by themselves if they didn't have this center where they could exercise and so on, because the grandkids are in school and the parents are both working.
Typical story.
Yeah.
Before you went to Cuba, did you read any books, whether it's fiction or nonfiction, about Cuba?
Well, I've read a lot of good articles over the years, primarily from the New York Times. I think that their reporting is quite accurate, and if you get a copy of the 26-page story I wrote, I quote quite a few New York Times articles in there to try to fill out what I didn't learn on the trip.
And we've both been very closely connected to the history as it's developed through the decades of Cuba, what's going on. We're students of history, so.
Is it getting better in Cuba now?
Yes.
Than what happened like 100 years ago?
Oh, infinitely.
Sure. I mean, look at what I talked about Trinidad, for example, which was founded in 1517. Slavery wasn't abolished until 1886.
And Angela, you really love music and art.
I do.
And so,
Yes.
so maybe ask a question about that.
Okay, a question about music. Let's say someone has a beautiful voice, but I guess it's called dictator, or the government decides, no, I don't want you as a singer, I want you as a doctor.
I don't think it works that way. I didn't get the impression that the K through college free education is, I got the impression that you pursue what your interests are, and then you will be assigned a job in that area. As I said, for 3 years. And then after that, you can look in the newspaper at the ads and try to find another job. But like one of the things, after our farewell dinner in Havana, we all got to ride back to the hotel in a beautiful American convertible. And I thought those convertibles were probably owned by the driver, but they're not. They're state employees. And not only is it his responsibility to drive the convertible, it's also his responsibility to keep it mechanically working. And so when it needs work, he would take it to a state auto repair shop.
I think in the case such as you cited about somebody who has a lot of musical talent, you would contact some of the organizations that these dance companies or acting companies and offer to audition for them, because these are all very young people.
Well,
And they didn't just fall in there by accident.
And one of the people that I write about in my story is Alex, and we one of the evenings we got to go back to the Ludwig Foundation, obviously German sponsored, Ludwig was a German person who became enthralled by contemporary Cuban art. And so he founded this foundation. And in my story, I give I give Alex's email. And that is a question you could email him and ask that, because and when I had talked to him, he had just gotten back the day before from Brussels. Had spent 2 or 3 months in Brussels showing his art, and he had a fellowship. And then the next month, in January of this year, he was going to the Cleveland Art Institute, where he had another fellowship. So he's a very well-traveled young man, 28 years old.
Wow.
And it would be interesting if you contacted him to see how open he could be in his email, because I don't have any idea.
And
We don't know the degree of censorship.
Maybe last question, Angela.
Yeah, one last question is, out of all the vehicles that you were in Cuba, what was the most comfortable ride that you really enjoyed?
Oh, of course, our bus, the coach. I mean, it was a real luxury coach with feet rests and a place for your water bottle, and I don't mean to sound like a spoiled American, because, for example, I've been to India 3 different times, so my love are all the developing countries, and the more exotic the better. So I'm used to traveling rough, but what helps your stamina is that you can have a little luxury here and there, like a good hotel or a good bus.
Well, I thank you for this opportunity, and I really enjoyed both your speeches.
Oh, good.
And
I hope it was informative and entertaining.
It's actually, I've learned to be grateful for what I do have, because from what I've seen in those houses, and even on the outside, I just almost cried.
Well, I've seen a lot worse in other countries. I mean, that was for example, if you go to India, by Indian standards, that's luxury.
Okay?
Yeah.
This is all new to me.